Belichick about it.
Yeah. I think Rob talked about it. I don't really have anything to add. Right now, our minds are on Miami, and that's who we're getting ready for. We're ready to play down there Monday night. So we could go this week. There'll be another competitive game down there, and then playing at home Monday night. Be a great atmosphere. So we're trying to get ready for that.
That's Bill Belichick on WEEI. Earlier today on the Today Show on NBC, LiAngelo Ball, joined by his dad, LeVar Ball, spoke out for the first time about the shoplifting incident in China and being lifted out of UCLA.
We all went out one night, went to the mall, went to the Louis Vuitton store. People started taking stuff, and then, me just not thinking and being with them, I took something too. And we left thinking we'd just get away, our kids think. I didn't realize till I got back to my hotel, I'm like, that was stupid, but I didn't know it was too late. And then sure enough, the next morning, the police came and got us.
We apologize. All these boys are going to get on the Lakers. Watch how I do this.
I'm Jeff Biggs. This is NBC Sports Radio.
Say this about the Steelers. Under Mike Tomlin, they seem to always play to the level of their opponent. Tomlin's talking about winning the Super Bowl. Okay. I've heard how refreshing that is. And when you're 10-2, you can do that. You don't have to say, one game at a time and all this. I can remember 18 years ago chastising Paul Hamilton. The ETSU Buccaneers had just lost a game. I think it was to Georgia Southern, 55-7. The record fell to 5-3. And they were still talking about going 8-3, and they had to go to Middle Tennessee State, which is a FBS program. I think back then it was still Division 1A, and ETSU was what's now known as FCS Division 1AA. Okay. But they were still talking, they just lost 55-7. They're not talking about we need to regroup, focus on next week's opponent. They were talking about going 8-3. Come on. I later interviewed Paul Hamilton. We got to get him back on the show. And he discussed this with us, and he said, yeah, you're probably right, Marky. You're probably right. We should have probably been focusing a little bit more on the next opponent instead of, 8-3 at the period of time. Hello, I'm Marky Bilson, your voice of choice for a new generation of Tri-City sports fans. The name of the program, Tri-City Sports Now. We own the Tri-Cities. Why? Best guess, hardest hitting opinions in the market, as well as the fact that you'll find it on 1420 NBC Sports Radio Tri-Cities, Tri-City Sports Now. What do I say? We own it. I'm your voice of choice. I've gotten through all those little cliches that I say to begin the program. Today's show, Selena Summers, Orange and White Report. Always. This is becoming my favorite Tennessee guest to talk to. Because, first of all, she is knowledgeable. Second of all, she is, just a constant force on the social media. Who's going to be the next coach, all this sort of stuff. And then, you know what else she is? She also represents that part of Tennessee fan base that, well, I think is just a little bit too optimistic. Let's put it that way. I'd like to come up with some catchphrase, some really biting, cutting. I'll have to think of that right here. Homers. There you go. Tennessee shills. Well, I don't want to call Selena Summers that. But he has a very optimistic view. Whereas I am, guys, it's not 1998 anymore. Tell me again why this isn't a middle-of-the-pack football program. Haven't won the SEC in 10 years and the SEC in 20. And 4-8 last year, worst record in the conference. One could make the argument, certainly on the short term, that they're the worst program in the SEC. Get to that in just a second. Then at 1 o'clock, someone who certainly does not coach the worst basketball program in the Southern Conference. In fact, he coaches one of the best, and that would be Steve Forbes. Exciting rematch at Freedom Hall against Northern Kentucky, the team that the Bucks opened up their season against with a disappointing 19-point defeat. It made you said there is only one returning starter from this year, huh? So we'll find out how the Bucks are better this year than they were in the last. But anyway, since we last joined you last Friday, we had on John Bryce, I remember. I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second. But since we last joined you, the Tennessee Volunteers have hired Phil Fulmer to be their athletic director, and they tried to turn former AD John Currie into the next Butch Jones. I mean, in terms of a popularity, they want to fire him for cause now. The other thing that has occurred here, you may be noticing, we're not streaming on iHeartRadio or TuneIn at the moment. There's some issues there. We are streaming, however, on Facebook Live. So there you are. We're on Facebook Live, and you'll be able to stream wherever you're watching. You'll be able to see us here live. I may continue to do this in the handsome face of mine that you're now able to see. Yes, I'm looking at you right now on Facebook Live. What does Bilson look like, you may wonder? Well, here we go. It's like, at one time it was Axl Rose without the tattoos. Maybe still is. I don't know. Anyway, the hiring of Fulmer, to me, it shows a little bit of how insular Tennessee athletics have become. Hear the fan base, they start talking about what's the dream staff for Tennessee. And it's always returning a John Chavis. It's, Kevin Steele coming back. I mean, it's John Gruden, for that matter, because he married a cheerleader from the Tennessee Volunteers. He'll certainly want to come back to Knoxville because of that. And it's looking to some, Tennessee Volunteer greats. And I am the first guy that says, keep your legends in the fold. But at the same time, is it looking forward? That's the question. That's what I've always asked about Phil Fulmer. I mean, I note the hire he made as ETSU's football coach, Carl Torbush. Mid-60s, now 11-22 in 3 years. The other thing about this, and when I say insular, is that at one time, sure, hire the coach to be the athletic director. Vince Dooley, although one could say, where did the Georgia football program go after Dooley left as a coach and became the athletic director? Frank Broyles, it used to be that it wasn't that uncommon for the coach, usually almost always the football coach. Jim Valvano was the basketball coach at NC State and the athletic director, but he was the only one, certainly at the time. And in major college athletics, a lot of times you would have, the football coach will be the athletic director. Les Robinson, though, speaking of basketball coaches, he was the athletic director at ETSU back in the 80s. But right now, that's just not the case. Outside of Fulmer, I can name four ADs who are known for doing something other than being the athletic director at their school. Lynn Swann, Southern California. Barry Alvarez over at Wisconsin. Bobby Valentine, former Major League manager. Rangers, Mets, was over in Japan for a while. That guy. He's actually the athletic director at Sacred Heart. I said on a Facebook Live over the weekend, it was High Point. I got Sacred Heart and High Point mixed up. Sue me. Okay. Ray Tanner. No, Ray Tanner is. I did South Carolina AD, so maybe you do from that standpoint. But Tanner won a couple of College World Series with the Gamecocks. We basically brought the baseball program into national. They'd been nationally ranked. They'd been to the College World Series before, but they won national championships with the baseball team. And, South Carolina, I don't think, outside of a track and field championship, I don't think that the athletic program had ever won a national championship prior. Of course, they are now the defending women's national champion in basketball. So, but other than that, all the ADs are people that you would know from being ADs. Now, the news comes out they want to try to fire John Currie for cause down in Knoxville. I really think the argument for this is a little disturbing. I don't think they're going to be able to get away with it, to be honest with you. He took a private plane to meet with Mike Leach. Yes, he acted independently. Oh, he didn't contact the chancellor and all that. You've got to give the athletic director some reins. I think I mean, if acting independently is an act of firing for cause, then I would think any athletic director at Tennessee is doomed. Because if you have to always go through a checkpoint, I'd better contact Beverly Davenport before I I'd better my special assistant Phil Fulmer to see if it's okay if I can hire Mike Leach, if I can go meet with him, then you're not really a very powerful athletic director. The question that I pose to Tennessee fans right now, would they rather have an innovative coach like Leach right now? And he could have come. And if Leach was here, he would certainly dominate the SEC in terms of media perspective. Let's taste that. I mean, he'd be the star in press conferences in the entire SEC. And then you'd have Curry as the AD. Would you rather have that right now? Or would you rather have Phil Fulmer as the AD and coach? Who do we bring on as a coach? I don't know. Now it looks like Les Miles isn't coming. A lot of reports saying that he's no longer in the fold. Les Miles, okay. For the most part, right now, the unknown coaches, the guys that are rumored, are the same people that were the 6th, 7th, 100,000th choice of John Curry. Chad Morris, for instance. Chad Morris. His resume really makes Greg Schiano look like a Hall of Famer. Chad Morris in 2009 was coaching high school football. Chad Morris is 13-22 at SMU. I realize it's SMU, but it does speak of, let's just say, it's the end of the 90s and we hire Mike Cavan to be the head coach at Tennessee. I mean, it's like that, Coordinators are big on the list. I thought we couldn't bring in T. Martin because he's just a coordinator. He doesn't have any head coaching experience. We spoke of Les Miles, evidently his name, various reports saying that he is no longer a candidate. That was the star coach. And if you look at Fulmer's record, because remember, he's the guy that basically recommended, got the ball rolling. He basically hired Carl Torbush at ETSU. And it made a lot of sense from the Phil Fulmer goes a-hunting for a coach standpoint that he would look to Les Miles. I mean, Miles is older, 63 years old. Miles is successful. Don't get me wrong. He won a national championship at LSU. Everybody knows that. But he was a veteran coach. But at 63, you're hiring coach then for ideally about a 5-year period, not a 10-year period. Okay. And that would imply that you have a short-term fix in your hands. You would hire Les Miles if you had what you thought was a good team right now that could continue to win, but your coach left for a better program of the pros. That's why you would hire a 63-year-old coach. Well, Tennessee right now, let's face it, probably the worst quarterbacking situation. There's not, you can tell me about John Kelly, Ty Chandler coming back, this sort of thing. I read a piece by John Adams talking about how great the talent was that Tennessee has coming back. Really? Why did they go 4-8 this past year? Yeah, it's a rebuilding project. Everybody knows that. It's a rebuilding project. So do you hire a 63-year-old coach to rebuild knowing that in just a few years, people are all going to be saying, how much longer can he go on? Look what happened with Steve Spurrier at South Carolina. As soon as he approached 70, really, the drain was pulled at South Carolina. That's what would happen if they hire, and it doesn't appear that Tennessee will, Les Miles. Anyway, Torbush, 11-22 at ETSU. So my question is, isn't Phil Fulmer the last guy that you really would asked to hire a football coach right now? That's his track record. And the other thing that also goes into the Fulmer will hire veteran coach, or if you're cynical, old coach, is just how T. Martin can't get an interview. 39 years old, Southern California, offensive coordinator. seemingly all sorts of other coordinators are being asked, but, they're generally speaking in their mid-40s or older. Mid-40s isn't old for a coach, but, you're talking Kevin Steele, who's in his 50s. That's who you're talking about bringing in a lot of these cases. Yeah, he knows Kevin Steele. Sure, they used to coach together, Fulmer and Steele. But, that's what you're talking about bringing in. I really don't think, and I think it's a safe bet to say anybody that thinks that T. Martin should be brought in as coach in waiting as the offensive coordinator, it's ridiculous. First of all, that never works. Probably sent Bill Stewart, remember the old West Virginia coach, to an early grave. Not only a early retirement, but probably did. Number two, if Martin would be leaving a prestigious football program, one of the best in the country, for middle of the pack SEC. I know it's his alma mater, but it's a step down. Number three, even if you did that, he'll be coach and wait. You're not giving any confidence to the guy that you hire who needs to do a rebuilding project, one. And two, if and when, after how many years, T. Martin then becomes the coach, he's always looked at as, well, he's not as good as the previous one. He's always looked at as the guy that they couldn't give the job to right away. If Martin comes in, great. Last week I was all T. Martin needs to be the head coach of the Tennessee Volunteers. I still am. If by some chance he comes in, somehow, some way, and it'll be days and days and days, it may be after the early signing period, the way that we're going right now. If Martin was finally brought in, then you're looking at a circumstance in which, I think it would be the best thing for the program, but if he was brought in as a offensive coordinator, and I don't think he would accept that, he'd be doomed to failure. By the way, what makes Martin not ready now, but Brett Venables over from Clemson, defensive coordinator for the Tigers, ready now? So they're talking about Brent Venables. That's fine. Defensive coordinator, defending national champion, might be two-time national champion. You could do far worse. And I know Venables has been around at defensive coordinator for a longer time, both Clemson and Oklahoma, but really, at this time, Martin's been an assistant coach in the college ranks for how many years? What doesn't he get by now? Anyway, Fulmer, this is what the Fulmer hire did. He provided a feel-good circumstance for Tennessee fans. If he's able to sell a second-string coach to the fan base, because right now that's what Tennessee is looking at. Coordinators and Chad Morris. Maybe the guy from Toledo. Used to be the Vols could get the coach from Cincinnati. Now they're getting him from Toledo. But the only guy that can sell that to the Tennessee fan base is really Phil Fulmer. So that's why you hire him as the AD. Don't make for that hire as anything more than that. Hey, I'm Marky Bilson. As this show continues, be joined by Selena Summers as well as Steve Forbes. Summers writes for Orange and White Report. She's got a lot of takes. She may have an inside track on who the new coach will be. She is really working hard on that. And then, of course, Steve Forbes. Well, that was a good hire. 24 victories or more in his first 2 years at ETSU. Yeah, that was a good hire. Can Phil Fulmer make as quality of a hire as the Vols football coach as Dr. Richard Sander did as the athletic director at ETSU hiring Forbes? We'll find out. Tri-City Sports Now comes back after this.